It is the third week of July, and it is 2 inches the afternoon. Your air conditioner has been running since 9 this morning, 4 hours without a rest, and the thermostat in your hallway still reads 76. You set it to 68. You set it to 68 3 hours ago, and it has not gotten there. And if I am honest with you, it is not going to. You can hear the unit outside the window straining, that low hum that never quits, and you can feel the warm air sitting against your skin like a wet shirt. But that is not the part I want you to feel. I want you to look up, above your head, in a space you have not climbed into since the day you signed the papers on that house. The temperature right now is 142 degrees. The plywood of your roof deck is hot enough to burn the back of your hand if you laid it flat against the wood. And every single minute that attic sits up there cooking, your electric meter is spinning, and somebody in an office building 4 states away is getting a little bit richer off of your discomfort. Now I want you to sit with this. Your house is not failing you. Your house is doing exactly what it was built to do. It was just built wrong on purpose, and nobody ever told you. There is a strip of plain cotton cloth that costs about $4 and a stapler you already own, and that, along with a flashlight and one cool morning of your time, will do more to cool the upstairs of your house than the $3,000 of machinery you have been feeding all summer. On one side of this is a fix that costs you $4, maybe $6 in a bad week if the fabric store has raised its prices. On the other side is a cooling bill that runs the average American household somewhere between $2,000 and $2,400 a year, every year, forever, with no end and nothing owned at the end of it. $4 against $2,400 a year. That is the whole of it. That is what this is about. And by the time I am done, you will understand why the cheap thing stays quiet and the expensive thing gets sold to you over and over. My name is Jacob Zook. I am Amish, and I farm here in Geauga County, Ohio, on land my grandfather worked before me. I have never paid an electric bill in my life. Not one, not ever. And the upstairs bedroom where my wife and I sleep on the hottest night of August, with the sun beating that roof all day long, stays cooler than yours does, with thousands of dollars of machinery fighting for it. I am going to be honest with you the way I always am, because honesty is the only thing that makes a video like this worth an hour of your evening. I have gathered the whole of what my family knows about keeping a house comfortable without the grid into a book, and it is over at jacobzook.com. I will not bring it up again, so if you want it, it is there. But I will tell you plainly what the bold claim of this video really means and where it stops, because I would rather be straight with you than be impressive. I am not going to stand here and promise you that a $4 piece of cloth will turn your house into an icebox in the middle of a heat wave. It will not. What it will do is take the worst of the radiant heat off your ceiling and give your air conditioner, if you still choose to run one, a much easier fight. The honest number is somewhere around 6 to 10 degrees off the upstairs in real conditions, not a laboratory. That is honest, and that is plenty. Stay with me, because the part most folks get wrong is near the end, and the part that should make you angry comes right before it. Now let me tell you what is really going on, because once you see the simple sense of it, everything after makes plain sense. The first thing you have to understand is that your attic is lying to you about what it is for. You think of it as a part of your house, a dusty box where you store the Christmas things. It is not. In a house built right, the way my grandfather built this one, the attic is what we call a buffer. It is the space that takes the beating. The sun hits the roof gets hot, the attic catches all of that heat, and then it hands the heat back to the sky before it can come down into the rooms where your children sleep. That is the whole job of an attic, to breathe the heat out, to take the punch so the rooms below do not have to. But somewhere around the time my own father was a young man, and he tells me it was the late 1960s, the English builders, and forgive me, that is just what we call folks outside our community. There is no disrespect in it. The English builders decided to do it different. They sealed the attic up. They stuffed it full of pink insulation. They cut 2 small vents in the gable ends, maybe a thin strip down the ridge, and they called it good. And then they sold the homeowner a bigger air conditioner to make up for all the heat that suddenly had nowhere to go. That was the trade they made for you without ever asking your permission. The attic stopped being a buffer. It became a furnace. And the furnace sits on top of your bedroom from 10 inches the morning until 10 at night, radiating heat down through the ceiling, into your sheets, into the walls of your children's rooms. Your air conditioner is not cooling your house. It is fighting a furnace your builder installed on top of it. We never made that mistake. We could not. We had no air conditioner to fall back on, so every choice in our building had to work on its own, in the real heat, with no machine to hide behind. Now here is the part of the science you need, and I will tell it slow. Hot air rises. That is not a folk saying, and it is not a religious claim. It is just physics, true anywhere on this earth. In a sealed attic, the hot air rises, and then it has nowhere to go, so it sits there pressing down on your ceiling like a hand. In a house built right, the hot air rises. It climbs up and out through openings near the peak, and as that column of hot air leaves, it pulls cooler air in behind it. Through the low windows, through the cellar door, through any opening near the ground, the whole house starts to move. The whole house starts to breathe. The engineers have a long name for this. They call it the stack effect, or buoyancy-driven ventilation. And you can find serious papers about it in any university library, written by men with letters after their names. We just call it building a house right. I want to give you a second piece of the science, because it is the one that matters most, and it is the one almost nobody understands. When the sun hits a shingle, that shingle gets hot. The wood of the roof deck underneath gets hot, and that hot wood radiates heat downward in a straight line. Now here is the thing. Radiant heat does not travel the way the heat from a stove travels. It does not float through the air and warm it up gradually. Radiant heat goes in a straight line, like light, until it strikes something solid, and then it dumps its heat into whatever it struck. The insulation lying on your attic floor does almost nothing about it, because radiant heat is not coming up from the floor, it is shooting down from the roof deck. It strikes the top of your insulation, it strikes your wiring, it strikes your ceiling drywall, and eventually it strikes the air around your sleeping body. The engineers call this radiant transfer. We just call it the roof cooking you through the ceiling. And here is what stops it. Nailed across the underside of the roof boards in this farmhouse, where the rafters meet at the ridge, there is a long strip of plain white cotton muslin, not insulation, not a vapor barrier, cotton cloth, the kind you can buy at any fabric store for about $1 a yard. My grandfather put it there. His grandfather put it in the house before this one. My uncle stapled strips of it in his barn last spring. We have been doing this for as long as anyone in my community can remember, and here is why it works. That cotton breaks the straight line of the radiant heat before it can reach down to where you are. The heat strikes the cloth instead of your ceiling. And there is more. The cotton draws a little moisture out of the cool night air, and through the heat of the day, as the roof above it bakes, the cotton lets that moisture go slowly. The water evaporating off the cloth carries heat away with it. It is the very same idea as a wet handkerchief tied around your neck on a hot day. Any man who has worked a hayfield in July knows exactly what I mean. The water leaves and it takes the heat with it, and the cloth stays cool, and the air just below it stays cool. The engineers call it evaporative cooling, and they will tell you every gram of water that evaporates pulls a great deal of heat with it. We just call it the wet rag trick our mothers taught us. Now let me give you the proof with my own thermometer, because I do not want you to take my word for it. I went up into the attic of this farmhouse last August, on the hottest day of the whole summer. It was 93 degrees outside. The attic of this house, which has a working roof box and a strip of cotton on the ridge that my grandfather hung 90 years ago, was 78 degrees. 78. The roof deck above my head was hot enough that I could not hold my palm against it, and yet the air I was standing in was cool enough that I did not break a sweat. Across the road, my neighbor's house, built in 1971, sealed up tight, no roof box, fiberglass bats crammed against the rafters. His attic that same afternoon was 136 degrees. I know because he walked over later that day to ask me why his upstairs would not cool down, and I went back with my thermometer. Same day, same sun, same county. 60 degrees of difference. And not one machine running on my side of the road. Let me give you the parts list, and I will give you the honest prices, because I am not going to round anything up to make it sound grand. 4 yards of plain white cotton muslin, the cheapest, thinnest kind they sell, about $4 at the fabric store. A staple gun you almost certainly already own, and a box of staples for $1 or $2 if you need them. A roll of aluminum window mesh from the hardware store, about $3. A flashlight. A shop vacuum if you have one, your hands if you do not. That is the whole list. Call it $6 to $10 all told, and most of you have half of it in the shed already. Now, let me walk you through the build, and I will tell it slow, because this is the part that matters, and the part where I do not want you to make the mistake your neighbor made. The first thing you do is your gable vents. Almost every house built in this country between 1940 and 1990 has 2 triangular wooden vents up at the peaks of the short ends of the attic. You have seen them from the outside 1,000 times. They look like little louvered triangles. From the inside, they should look like daylight. So pick a cool morning, early, before the attic heats up and turns dangerous, and climb up there with your flashlight and look at those vents from the inside. If you can see clear daylight through them, good. That is what they are supposed to do. But if you cannot, and most people cannot, then you have just found the first reason your house has been cooking itself. The screens behind those vents are usually clogged with 30 years of dust, old paint, dead wasps, and sometimes loose-blown insulation that a contractor packed up against them without a thought. I have stood in attics where the gable vents were sealed over completely with spray foam by a man who was paid $2,000 by the homeowner to do it in the name of energy efficiency. He was sealing the house's lungs shut and charging for it. So you clean them. Pull the debris out with your hands or the shop vacuum. If the screen behind is rusted through, peel it off and staple new aluminum mesh in its place. You want openings about 1/8 of an inch. Small enough to keep the insects and the bats out, big enough that the air moves freely through. That is step 1, and it will take you about 20 minutes. Step 2 is the cotton I told you about. You take your 4 yards of plain white muslin and your staple gun, and you climb back up there, and you staple the cloth across the underside of the roof deck where the rafters meet at the ridge. You run it in a strip about 2 feet wide, the length of the attic, right along the peak. Now here is the part most folks get wrong, so mind me on this. You do not need to cover the whole roof. People hear this and they go buy 30 yards of cloth and try to line the entire underside of the deck, and they wear themselves out and waste their money. You do not need that. The radiant heat is worst at the top, at the ridge, where the air is hottest and the sun has been hammering longest. You break the heat at the hottest point, the top 2 feet, and that is plenty. And here is the second mistake, and it is the one that ruins the whole thing. Do not use treated fabric. Do not use a tarp. Do not use plastic sheeting because it is cheaper or because you have a roll of it in the garage. It must be plain, untreated cotton, because the entire point is that it breathes and holds a little moisture. Plastic does the exact opposite of what you want. Plastic traps moisture against your roof deck and rots the wood. Cotton breathes. Mind the difference, because it is the whole difference. I had an Englisher come out to my farm 3 summers ago asking me about this very thing. He listened, he went home, and in one afternoon he stapled muslin across the ridge of his attic. He called me a week later. He said his upstairs bedroom had dropped 6 degrees overnight. He said his wife slept under a blanket for the first time in July in 20 years, and that she got a little teary about it and asked him why nobody had ever told them. $6 in materials. One afternoon with a stapler. That is the kind of thing that happens when a house is finally allowed to do what it was built to do. Now I will give you a fourth thing, and this one is for the folks whose summers run hotter and longer than mine, down south where the cotton alone will not carry the whole load. There is a material the English sell in a roll and call radiant barrier. It is nothing but a thin sheet of aluminum foil bonded to a paper or a plastic backing, and a roll big enough for an average attic runs you somewhere between $30 and $60, depending where you buy it. Now, I will be honest. That is the most expensive thing I have named in this whole video, and it came off a factory line, not out of a barn loft, so I will not pretend it is some old Amish secret. It is not. But the physics behind it is the same physics as my grandfather's cotton, only stronger. Radiant heat travels in a straight line until it strikes something, and a shiny metal surface does not soak that heat up the way wood and drywall do. It throws most of it back. The men who measure these things say a clean foil surface will turn away something like 95% of the radiant heat that hits it. So you take that roll up into the attic, and with the shiny side facing down toward your living space, you staple it across the underside of the rafters, the same place you would hang the cotton, running the length of the roof. The heat coming off that hot roof deck hits the foil and bounces back up instead of pressing down onto your ceiling. Here is the part folks get wrong with the foil, and it matters as much as anything. So mind me, the shiny side must face an air gap. It must have open air below it to throw the heat into. If you lay it flat down on top of your floor insulation where it is touching things, it stops working, because radiant barrier only works across a gap of air, not pressed against a surface. And keep it clear of any wiring, because it is metal and it conducts. Do the cotton if you are frugal and your summers are mild. Do the foil if your summers are cruel and you can spare the $40. I will tell you plainly, in my own house, the cotton has been enough for 90 years, but my house sits in Ohio, not in Georgia, and I would be lying if I told you my fix was the right fix for every roof in this country. It is not. Honest is more useful than impressive. Before I go on to the night draft, let me pause for just a moment, because there is something I want to offer you. If you are the kind of person who wants to lower your bills, waste less, repair more, and run a steadier home that does not depend on a company 4 states away, my wife and I keep a community for exactly that. We call it our Amish Home Saving System, and you can ask us questions whenever you get stuck, and folks share what worked in their own houses. The link is down in the description. Now, back to the work, because the night draft is the part most folks skip, and it ties the whole thing together. The night draft is the last piece, and I will tell you how to run it. After the sun goes down, when the outside air drops below 80 degrees, and even in the worst part of summer, it usually does by 10 or 11 at night, you open the lowest windows in your house on the side that has been sitting in shade all day. Not all of them. 2 or 3 on the cool side, opened maybe 4 inches. Then you make sure those gable vents are clear, and if you have an attic hatch, you open it a crack. And then you let the physics work. The hot air that built up in your attic all day climbs up and out through the gable vents. As it leaves, it creates a small, low pressure inside the house, and the cool night air gets pulled in through the low windows you opened, and it moves up through the house, through the attic, and out the top in a slow, steady draft. Stand in the hallway around midnight, and you will feel a soft, cool current moving past your ankles. That is your house finally breathing the way it was meant to. And by morning, the wood frame of the house itself, and this is the part people miss, every stud in your walls has shed most of the heat it soaked up during the day. The wood is a thermal mass. If you still want to run your air conditioner the next afternoon, it starts the day from a much lower baseline. It does not have to fight a furnace anymore. You will see it on your bill within one billing cycle. There is one more thing I want to share with you before the cautions, because it is the thing my mother taught me when I was a boy of 8, standing in the summer kitchen behind our farmhouse, with the bread dough rising on the wood counter, and I did not understand what she was doing until I was a grown man with a wife of my own. A summer kitchen, for those of you who have never seen one, is a small, separate building behind the main farmhouse. The Pennsylvania Germans built them from at least the 1700s, and you can still find them on the old farmsteads. It is one room with a wood cook stove and a window on the wall opposite the door. The obvious point of it is that you do your hot cooking out there in summer, so you do not heat up the main house. That much most folks can guess. But the point my mother taught me is not obvious. When she was cooking out there on a hot morning, she would open the door that faced north, and she would open the window on the south wall, and she would send me into the main house to crack the parlor windows on the shaded side, and then she would light the stove. The stove heat would rise, the heat would leave through the south window, and as it left it would pull air in through the open door, and that air came from the main house, drawn along by the suction of the hot stove pushing its exhaust out above it. She was using the wood stove as a pump, not just to vent the kitchen, but to vent the whole farmhouse. The babies slept cooler, the old folks rested cooler, and she did it burning maybe 2 armfuls of wood. Now you have a stove in your kitchen right now, and a window near it, and a window somewhere across the house. On a hot evening, when the sun is down and the air outside has started to drop, turn one burner on low, just one. Open the window above it 3 inches. Open a window at the far end of the house 3 inches, and you have made the very same pump my mother made every morning for 50 years. The little bit of heat you add is nothing against the volume of cool evening air it drags through the rest of the house. You will feel it in 20 minutes, and the cost of running one electric burner for that long is somewhere around 5 cents. 5 cents to pull the cool of the evening through your whole house. There is no profit in 5-cent cooling, and that is exactly why nobody ever told you. Now the safety word plainly, because this matters, and because I would not be honest if I sent you up a ladder without it. An attic in summer is a dangerous place, and I want you to treat it like one. Do your attic work early in the morning, before the sun has had time to drive the temperature up past 120 or 130 degrees. People die of heat in attics. They go up at 2 inches the afternoon to fetch a box. They get dizzy, and they do not come down. Do not be that story. Drink water before you go up. Take water with you, and if you start to feel lightheaded or your heart starts to race, you come down immediately and you do not argue with yourself about it. Second, watch where you put your feet. In most attics, you are walking on ceiling joists with nothing but drywall between them, and that drywall will not hold a grown man. Step on the joists. Lay a board across them if you have to, and never put your weight where there is no framing under you, or you will come through your own ceiling. Third, before you staple anything or pull any insulation, look for wiring, and if you find old wiring that is cracked, brittle, or has bare copper showing, you stop and you call a licensed electrician, and you do not touch it. Old knob and tube wiring up in an attic is nothing to be brave about. And last, wear a dust mask and gloves, because old fiberglass insulation will tear up your lungs and your skin, and the dust of 50 years up there is not something you want to breathe. None of this is meant to scare you off. It is meant to bring you back down the ladder in one piece. I tell you the danger because I would want a body to be straight with me. Now let me be just as honest about what this does and what it does not do, because I will not be the man who oversold you a piece of cloth. This will not turn your house into a walk-in cooler. On a 98-degree day with the humidity sitting heavy, you are not going to feel like you stepped into a meat locker, and any man who tells you different is lying to sell you something. What this does is take the radiant furnace off your ceiling and let the house breathe at night, and the honest result is an upstairs that runs 6 to 10 degrees cooler than it did, and an air conditioner that runs far less often and far less hard, if you choose to keep one. It works best in a dry heat, and works less well where the night air stays muggy and never really cools, because the night draft needs the outside air to drop for it to pull. And I will tell you plainly, this cotton trick is the oldest part of what I am sharing. But the gable mesh and the night draft, that is just good building sense that the whole country once knew. I am not going to pretend I invented any of it, or that it is some buried Amish secret. It is written down. It has been written down for 200 years. You were just never handed the page. So now let me tell you the part that should make you angry, and I want to be careful how I say it. Think about who makes money when your attic runs at 142 degrees. The power company makes money. Every degree of heat that pushes through your ceiling makes your air conditioner work harder, and a straining central unit can pull 3,500 watts. If your house is fighting that furnace overhead for an extra 4 or 5 hours a day, all through July and August, you are handing the utility somewhere between $60 and $100 a month that you would not be spending if your attic were simply allowed to breathe. Multiply that by the 140 million single-family houses in this country, and you are looking at billions of dollars a year in revenue that exists for no reason except that the houses cannot exhale. The shingle companies make money too, because a hot attic destroys shingles from underneath, and a roof that should last 30 years lasts 15, and you buy a new one twice as often as your grandfather did. The HVAC companies make money. The spray foam companies make money. There is a whole industry built on selling you the cure for a sickness that the very same industry installed in your house in the first place. Now, I do not call that a conspiracy, and I want you to hear me on this, because a conspiracy needs men in a room agreeing to deceive you. And I do not believe there was ever such a room. It is worse than a conspiracy, in a way, and stranger. It is a quiet agreement among everybody who profits to simply not mention the alternative, to never bring up the roof box, to never sell the cotton, to never explain the stack effect to a homeowner. They do not have to coordinate. Nobody has to sit down at a table and arrange it. They just have to stay quiet, each of them, for their own reasons, and they have stayed quiet for 50 years. There is a great deal of money in selling a man a bigger air conditioner. There is no money at all in telling him to staple $4 of cloth to his rafters. So the simple old methods sit quiet in farmhouses like mine. That is not wickedness. That is just who has a reason to teach you, and who has a reason to keep his mouth shut. We kept this knowledge in our community because we had to. When you cannot plug in a machine, you cannot afford to forget what your grandfather knew, so we wrote it down in the only way that lasts. Not in books, in houses. Every house we raise is a copy of the lesson the rest of the country was handed a machine to forget. So here is what I want you to do this week. Start small, but start. The first thing, this weekend, on a cool morning, take a flashlight and climb into your attic and look at your gable vents from the inside. Just look. See whether you can see daylight through them or whether they are clogged, painted shut, or foamed over. That one look will tell you most of what you need to know. The second thing, while you are at the hardware store, pick up a $3 roll of aluminum mesh and clean and rescreen those vents so the house can exhale. The third thing, on your next trip to town, buy 4 yards of plain white cotton muslin. Nothing treated, nothing fancy, and on the next cool morning, staple it across the ridge of your attic in a 2-foot strip. And the fourth thing, starting tonight, when the air outside drops after dark, open 2 or 3 low windows on the shaded side of the house 4 inches, and let it breathe until morning. That is the whole of it. 4 small things, none of them hard, none of them costing you more than the price of a single dinner out. Then come back and tell me in the comments what you found when you climbed up there. Were your gable vents clogged? Were they painted shut? Did somebody seal them with foam in the name of saving you money? And tell me too, what county do you live in, and how old is your house? I ask because the answers teach me as much as anything, and because the stories you send back are the reason I keep recording these. I read every single one. The little building methods our grandfathers used are exactly the kind of inherited knowledge that disappears when nobody writes it down, and the comments under this video are how we save them. And if what I said today rings true to you, then come back, because the next thing I want to show you is how my grandfather dug a root cellar under this very farmhouse that holds a steady 54 degrees year-round in January and in August both, with no machinery and no electricity, using nothing but clay, sand, and the slope of a hillside. It is the natural next step after today. So go climb into that attic this week, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.